I'm so excited to introduce this month's distinguished speaker. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about High Sky. We exist because 10% of transportation emissions are from aviation, and that number is expected to triple by 2050. We believe that hydrogen is the only solution to decarbonize aviation. There are three big challenges with implementing hydrogen for aviation. I call them the big three: infrastructure, cost, and regulatory. We work with aircraft manufacturers, fuel cell developers, hydrogen producers, and everyone in between to help lower the cost and availability of hydrogen. And of course, we work with government, industry, and other organizations to help develop a safe path forward to regulate this nascent space. High Sky Society holds free monthly webinars on the third Monday of every month. That's what you're at right now. This is High Sky Monthly. Distinguished speakers include folks from Plug Power, Universal Hydrogen, High Point, Highmark, Plasma Kinetics, Luftcar, and so many more. I can't even put into words how much I've learned from these webinars. So thanks again for all of our distinguished speakers. Past webinars are available on our website, highsky.org/shop. And I really look forward to seeing what we're going to learn in 2023 throughout these invaluable webinars. And finally, our flagship event, Flying High, is June 21st through the 23rd. This is the world's largest hydrogen aviation event. We are so excited. We'll have over 1,000 attendees, over 100 presentations, and the network is just going to be unheard of. So whether you're an industry professional or just looking to learn more about hydrogen aviation, Flying High will definitely have something for you. Sponsors can showcase their services or products to over 1,000 highly targeted attendees, or you can join over 100 speakers to do a presentation on your service, idea, or company. We cannot wait to work with you. Tickets are available now on our website. Get them. This event will sell out. We have a limited number of sponsorships and speaker slots available, so I encourage you to get in now so that you can showcase your technology or company or idea to over 1,000 highly targeted hydrogen aviation industry folks. It's a virtual event, but not Zoom. I can't wait to see you at Flying High. So now let's jump into High Sky Monthly. All right, welcome everybody. It was a bit of a rocky start this morning, but we've got it. So I am just so excited to welcome you all here today. We have a really exciting speaker, Mr. Peter Connors from Orrick. Peter Connors is a tax attorney. He's a partner in Orrick's New York office, and his practice focuses on cross-border transactions. He also has extensive experience in related areas of tax law, including financial transactions, corporate reorganizations, renewable energy investments, and controversy matters. He also leads the Orrick Section 45Q practice relating to the tax credit for carbon capture and sequestration. I am so excited. I've had a preview of his presentation. I think we are going to learn a ton today. So without further ado, I would love to introduce to you this month's distinguished speaker, Mr. Peter Connors. And Peter, you can go ahead and share your screen, and I will stop my share.
Okay, we'll give it a shot here. Hang on a sec. How does that look? Is everybody getting it?
Yep, we can see it.
And let's just see if this works. Right, so that looks like my presentation. There we go. How does that look, right? Thanks, Danielle. It's really great to be here. I've been following High Sky for a couple months now, and it's just such a fabulous organization. And thanks very much for the kind introduction. I'm a tax attorney, tax partner at Orrick. I've been working in the tax field for gosh, 35, 40 years. My practice has varied over the years. And while in general, my focus has always been on financial transactions and international transactions, cross-border transactions, in the last 5 years or so, I developed a very keen interest in climate-related tax provisions. I got into Section 45Q, which deals with carbon capture. That's an area I spend probably 50% of my time in. Another 25% or so of my time is in the hydrogen area. So, and I'm just so excited about this area. And of course, you just can't really open up to, the newspaper without realizing how important it is to address the changing climate environment and all the problems with CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. So delighted to be here, delighted to give you my perspective during the presentations. Happy to take some questions, as long as they're nice questions. But overall, I have a deck here that will go through about 45 minutes or so of your time. And I really do appreciate everybody being available. So let me begin. And of course, the first image here is the Airbus Zero-E plane. It's a markup, but there, as you go through, search the internet for H2 airplanes, there's just so much activity out there, and it's so exciting. And I'm just so inspired to see the development of technology. Now, what am I going to do today? I've got the outline divided up into 4 parts. I'm going to give you a little bit of a high-level overview of the IRA. I'm going to talk about some of the hydrogen-specific incentives, talking about sustainable aviation fuel, which is not really has nothing to do with hydrogen, but it is something that is important to the aviation industry. And then I'm going to talk about funding of hydrogen production facilities and just the techniques out there. And there's some really some innovative aspects of the IRA that I want to bring to your attention. So let me begin here. Let's just see. I'm trying to get this. Can you go back up? So the major focus on the IRA is the development of technology to produce clean energy. Nearly $400 billion is allocated to energy incentives. And I have to tell you, I'm a little confused here about why this little thing here is showing up on my screen. So hopefully I can get around that. But I don't know if you guys can see this. There's a little portion of my screen that's showing up here. But all right, we'll get past it. But the major focus is on, the IRA is to provide tax incentives related to production of clean energy. And nearly $400 billion is allocated to clean energy incentives. In general, the theme of the IRA is to provide what's known as tax credit neutrality, which means that the incentives will be across the board the same. And what I mean about regarding that is that if you look at wind and solar, there's a division between the tax incentive for wind, which is generally speaking a production credit, and the tax incentives for solar. And they fall into 2 categories. One is an investment type credit, and the other is a production credit. So an investment credit is basically is a percentage of the investment that one makes is eligible for a tax credit. A production credit is a credit which is based on the amount of the product, electricity, hydrogen, or in the case of 45Q dealing with carbon capture, how much CO2 is captured. So we've got that division in the tax law. It's been pretty much the lay of the land for the last 20 years. And now the theme of this legislation is to provide tax credit neutrality so that there will be, people will have the choice. Do you want a investment credit based on the amount of investment, or do you want a production credit? And that ultimately is just going to be a function of how you pencil out the incentives and whether you make a decision as to whether or not you can decide. I can elect to have a production credit. I can, on the other hand, I can elect to have a investment credit, and that just depends on the, I would say, on the outlook for your production facility. So that's just something that's inherent in all of the climate-related incentives. Now, with respect to hydrogen, there's been historically very little tax incentives for hydrogen. And, you know, for years, you know, we've heard people like Plug Power just address the need to put hydrogen on a par with the other types of technology. There's been huge incentives for wind and solar, but just basically nothing with respect to hydrogen. The only thing that's been available, and it's just probably by happenstance, was a small credit for recharging stations, which would include fuel cells. But you know, there's even, so that's just, if you just think about it, it was a $30,000 credit per taxpayer, very limited, you know, basically zero. And when you go back to the other major piece of legislation, so the step back, we've got the IRA, so this is tax legislation, and we've got the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Now that bipartisan infrastructure bill came in November 2021. It had $9.5 billion in incentives for hydrogen. Incentives, incentives is not the right word, but funding, grants, loans, all financial incentives, but zero when it came down to tax incentives. And now the IRA adds the other piece of that process. With the IRA now, hydrogen is going to be on an even par with other energy sources. About $9 billion was designated for investment in clean hydrogen. So let's now move to the next part of the agenda, which is the overview of the hydrogen provisions in the IRA. And you know, for those of you who've been following this area, you know that there's been this legislative debate. You've probably all heard about the colors of hydrogen. You know, there might be as many as 10 different colors, but the three dominant colors are gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and green hydrogen. And green hydrogen is hydrogen produced from renewable sources. And that's primarily hydrogen produced from electrolysis, a splitting of water between the H and the O. But the predominant source of hydrogen is hydrogen from fossil fuels, predominantly coal. And the price differential in terms of cost between gray hydrogen and blue hydrogen is phenomenal. Let me go back and say something about blue hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is hydrogen that is produced from natural gas, and hence the color blue. But it is possible to remove some of the CO2 that's emanated from the process and through carbon capture. So if we kind of just think about the big color scale, we've got the gray from coal, the blue from natural gas with carbon capture. And then we've got green hydrogen, which is the ultimate goal. And that is, largely speaking, hydrogen that is produced through electrolysis. Price differential right now is phenomenal. Green hydrogen probably costs about $5 a kilogram. Gray hydrogen costs about $1 a kilogram, and blue is somewhere in the middle. And one of the goals of the Department of Energy is to bring down the cost of green hydrogen. That goal is to bring it down to $1 a kilogram. So, and you know, to get to that goal, they've established the hydrogen hotshot program. So if you kind of search green hydrogen and DOE, you'll hear about the hydrogen shot program, goal to bring it down to $1 a kilogram, which again is basically bringing it down to on par with gray hydrogen. And so what does the IRA do? It basically has provides a credit of $3 a kilogram for on the production side of the credit, or a 30% investment tax credit for green hydrogen. And whether you get and that's, I'll say that I'll call that the enhanced credit, and that requires complying with certain labor and wage requirements and apprenticeship requirements. If one does not comply with those requirements, then the base credit is $60 a kilogram and 6% for ITC. Now, one other kind of just global point about the IRA is that largely it's tax incentives, but it's a very negotiated piece of legislation. The legislation has not only the tax incentives, but embedded in that, there are elements of social justice, and we'll hear about that as we go on. We talk about fuel cells and where the credits, where the production, or excuse me, where the fuel cells need to be located. And because of the legislative process, there are special incentives for clean energy facilities that are located in the areas where coal mines have been shut down, or where electricity producing facilities that have been powered with coal have been shut down. So, and you can imagine the politics that went on behind the scenes there, and how it so happened that the former coal mining locations got the incentive. So, again, there are tax incentives, and then there are, there's an element of social justice, special incentives for projects which are located in low-income communities, and then this give and take between the fossil fuel industry resulted in special incentives for production facilities that are located in the former coal mining areas. And just again, giving you this high level overview of the hydrogen provisions, they fall into two categories. Remember what I said, production credit versus investment credit. There is a section 45Q has the production credit. It's basically a credit based on the amount of hydrogen that's produced. And section 48 has an investment credit based on the investment in the facility. Again, taxpayers are going to need to elect to take one or the other. It all depends on how you pencil it out, whether you see the greater opportunity. Real important point in today's environment is that the amount of the credit is adjusted for inflation. So it's not just at least, of course, it's the production credit, because that's based on the amount of kilograms of hydrogen that's produced. So the credit is not just $3 a kilogram, it's going to be $3 plus an inflation factor beginning in 2026. And so you can imagine, that credit being not $3, but it could be $4 or $5, $6 a kilogram when we get to 10 years out. So, that's, again, it's just a very positive aspect of the credit. Again, mentioned earlier that $9 billion has been allocated to this area. So, it's exciting. In terms of how we calculate the credit, well, as I say, it's based on the number of kilograms produced. It's a 10-year production credit. The investment credit is a one-time credit. And the amount of the credit varies depending on the greenhouse gas reduction that remains after the production of the hydrogen. There's a life cycle analysis that's necessary to produce, to identify how much of the CO2 is emitted. It's a cradle to gate type of analysis. In other words, basically, you produce the hydrogen, you get it to the point that it's there, and that's as far as you go in terms of the analysis. It's not a cradle to grave, which would take it all the way through the life cycle. So it's a more generous calculation. And there, a major point here is that there was a legislative debate as to whether or not the credit should be available for both green and blue hydrogen, as well as obviously the base case green hydrogen. You can imagine, just the way the politics worked out. Folks in the coal mining states wanted to have gray hydrogen included. Folks in the natural gas producing states wanted to make sure that blue hydrogen was included. And of course, folks in the more left-leaning states wanted to have the credit only available for green hydrogen, that is the hydrogen produced through basically electrolysis. To measure how much greenhouse gas remains in the process, you're going to have to go through a life cycle analysis. There's a really terrific model that's been produced by one of the national labs, the Oregon National Lab. It's available on the internet. It's really terrific. It's available in an Excel format. You just input the source of energy and how the hydrogen is going to be produced, and that'll tell you what is the level of greenhouse gas that remains after the production of the hydrogen. For folks that have worked in this area on the tax side, you know that the LCA analysis is a bit of a black hole in certain areas, and certainly I can tell you for sure there's a bit of a black hole in the carbon capture area. The Treasury has really delegated the production or the analysis, the LCA analysis on carbon capture to DOE, and it's just a mystery. But really important here is that there is a model. There's a model on the DOE website. It's one of the clearest models I've ever seen. The tutorials are just fabulous. So when you get a break, take a look at that. A couple of other points of importance here. Credit is available for hydrogen produced after 2022, and it stops being available if the production facility begins construction after 2032. So there's really a 10-year period for which you have to begin construction of your hydrogen production facility. And if you and in keeping with this issue about gray and blue hydrogen versus green hydrogen, there's a specific prohibition on getting the credit for both clean hydrogen and facilities which will include carbon capture. So in other words, if you are producing hydrogen, let's call it blue hydrogen, which involves carbon capture, you can only get the credit for the carbon capture. You can't get it for both carbon capture and for the hydrogen that's produced. So that's kind of just a line in the sand, and this goes back to the skepticism that people had about whether or not blue hydrogen should even be included as an area for obtaining the credit. There's a 4-tier incentive that's that is to say, while the enhanced credit is going to be $3 a kilogram, you only get the credit if the full credit if you've met the labor and wage requirements. Again, this is the social justice part of the program. That is to say that if you just have if you don't meet the labor and wage and apprenticeship programs, then you're only going to get the base credit, which is going to be, instead of $3 a kilogram, is going to be 60 cents a kilogram. So that aspect of it is, is very clearly focusing on, making sure we have a stable, fairly paid workforce in this area. And you can see that, just looking through the chart, that the percentage of the credit ultimately is going to be determined by the amount of greenhouse gases, CO2 equivalents, that remain after the production. So the lower the amount of greenhouse gases that remain after the production of hydrogen, the higher the credit. Basically, green hydrogen is the only one that's going to get 100% of the credit, but there is an aspect, or a proportion of the credit would be available for both the gray, or really, I'm going to just say the blue hydrogen. Gray hydrogen will not get the credit, full stop. If you have a way, even with gray hydrogen, of capturing some of the CO2, there's a portion of the credit that would be available. If going back to the prior slide, I had the base credit and then the enhanced credit. The multiplier effect is basically saying if you comply with the labor, wage, and apprenticeship programs, the amount of the credit is multiplied by 5. Instead of being 0.6, it's $3 a kilogram. And there was, for those of you who've been following this area, you might have heard that there was a real incentive to start construction prior to January 29 of this year. And it was because the wage and apprenticeship requirements were waived, basically, under the statute, if construction had begun prior to that. And many of us have been working in this area, but just spent the last 2 months just making sure that those that the construction had begun. And when I say talk about the requirements, I'm talking about that these requirements apply to the construction of the production facility, and they also apply to alterations or repairs, and in the case of the production credit, for that whole 10-year period. And now, again, the same idea here for the hydrogen investment tax credit. It's a 4-tier. It's a 4-tier It's a 4-tier credit. Look at the greenhouse gases which are produced. If they're on the low end of the spectrum, if they're 0 kilograms to 0.45 kilograms, then the full credit's available. You see on your screen 6% with the multiplier effect, which I'll get to the next slide. It goes up to 30%. But if the greenhouse gases that remain are significant, then the credit will be accordingly reduced. And again, here's the this slide here talks about the enhanced credit percentage. 30% in the case of green hydrogen, 6% in the case of gray or blue with some type of carbon capture. Yeah, again, I just view this as an nod to the fossil fuel industry, and part of the give and take that went on between the folks from I'll say PA, Texas, and West Virginia, to get this legislation through. And so, whatever the legislative process is, everybody on my side of the fence is super happy that they were able to negotiate a resolution of these points. So again, here, this next slide just talks about the multiplier effect and how that credit, or the investment tax credit, production credit, gets multiplied by 5 as long as you've met the wage and apprenticeship requirements, or if you started construction prior to January 29 of this year. So again, a lot of energy on folks on my side of the fence has been spent in making sure that people began construction before then. And now that we're in a new, if you haven't made it, we'll kind of just figure out what those requirements are, and kind of just work through that. But again, it's thinking about the legislative process. This is part of the social justice part of the IRA. There's also a credit, largely speaking, I've been talking about the credit for the production of hydrogen, or the credit for the investment in the production facilities. And if you remember at the beginning, I said there was a outlier pre-IRA for fuel cells. The credit was basically limited to $30,000 per taxpayer. Well, the IRA actually changes the landscape, and this image here is of a Nel fuel cell. I'm sure everybody has heard of Nel. They seem to be the leading producer of electrolyzers and of fuel cells, and certainly, one that I've come across a lot in my travels. And the IRA includes a credit for recharging stations, and that credit includes up to $100,000 for fuel cells. That's is a very positive aspect of the IRA, but in keeping with the social justice aspect of the IRA, this credit is only going to be available if the fuel cell is located in a low-income rural area. So the fuel cells that are located in urban areas, you're not going to get the credit. So we'll just see what impact that has over the years in terms of the production of these different devices. But this is the credit is based on where the fuel cell is located, and probably going to be hard to measure when we're dealing with an airplane, right? I don't know the fuel cells in the airplane, we probably need guidance on where that goes. The credit also applies to the device that's used to dispense the hydrogen. So there you've got a basically a hydrogen pump. Again, one of the NEL products, and of course we don't see this in the Northeast, but there are a fair number of those in the state of California. But again, the same restrictions in terms of where they're located. So we'll see how that impacts whether this credit is effective. I suspect that once we get hydrogen vehicles going, that people will find a way to find the hydrogen. We'll go wherever it makes sense. Not hydrogen related, but important to the aviation industry is the sustainable aviation credit. And this, we've actually seen a lot of this in the press. It's currently the only non-fossil fuel that is effective for long-haul flights. H2 aviation is still very nascent. We've seen some test prototypes, but with respect to the sustainable aviation credit, this has been out there for a while. It draws on biomass basically, and it could be fuel that's produced from wood pellets, or it could be from food waste products or animal manure, things like that. It is available through 2024. This is, speaking tax is section 40B of the tax code, or section 6426 for an excise credit. It's there. I think it's considered a very generous credit. Just going to the next slide just lays out really the way this is set out in the code. Again, in section 40B with the general credit, section 6426K for an excise tax credit. You can only get one. And I'll just make the point that the credit used to be available for liquefied hydrogen, but part of the tax legislation, the IRA process, was resulted in elimination of the sustainable aviation credit for liquefied hydrogen, and all the credits for hydrogen are now in section 40V, which is what I've been talking about earlier. And once, so that these two credits, the which dollar-wise are $1 per gallon plus up to 50 cents per gallon, depending on greenhouse gas reduction, are available for fuel sold or used in 2023 and 2024. But once we get, and that's both the excise and general business credit, but once we get to 2025, then the credit falls in line with the other credits that are part of the IRA. And just as there is a base credit and there's an incentive credit in section 45Z, the clean fuel production credit, there's a credit of 35 cents a gallon for sustainable aviation fuel that does not meet the labor and apprenticeship requirements. That is, and that goes to where is the facility produced. There's the phrase that's used is a qualified production facility, and we look to where the hydrogen is, the fuel has been produced, and if it's produced in one that has met the labor, wage, and apprenticeship requirements, and the credit once again is multiplied times 6. So that's a high level overview of the sustainable aviation fuels credit. It's it is the factor right now in the aviation industry. And we'll see whether where it is in a couple of years from now. So I'm going to just move on now to spend the last 12 minutes and just talking about funding the production facilities. And this is where there's a lot of complicated work. Say in general, there are for the IRA, the main technique for providing the funding for any type of production facility, thinking, before the IRA, wind turbines or solar distribution centers or carbon capture facilities, was the tax equity partnership. And tax, if you look at the tax equity partnership, you see the triangle at the bottom there, that's the tax equity partnership, and especially a joint venture between the sponsor, the person that is developing the facility, and an equity investor. And the idea is to navigate the different tax rules that distinguish between a partnership on the one hand and a loan or preferred stock investment, and to provide investors with a return that's based on the production in the facility, but at the same time that is very measurable, and it could be based on a rate of return, thinking about yield to maturity, or it could be over a period of time, credits in a fixed dollar amount. But the basic point is that the investors, the tax equity investors, are largely going to be at least prior to 2023, we're going to be the large money center banks and regional banks, folks with a lot of tax capacity. So you think JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citibank, and of course the more regional type banking institutions like US Bank or PNC, and they are used to lending, so they wanted a return that was fairly certain, but yet the return had to be in the form of a return that would provide them tax credits, and that meant navigating the provisions of the tax law, which are designed to identify true partnership transactions. So the structures were really identified by the IRS at a number of red procs that provided minimum rates of returns, minimum investments, minimum contingent investments, and you can see here that these are really the requirements that are set forth in the two rev procs, one dealing with wind and another dealing with carbon capture, as to the percentages of tax benefits that had to be allocated between both the sponsoring entity and the tax equity partnership through a certain period. We refer to that period as the flip period, and then after that period. So that it's a very complicated transaction. It meant is that the transactions had to be on the bigger side, because the legal effort here really required a fair amount of work, and so transactions were typically well into the hundreds of millions of dollars, and only involved the largest of players. So that's the basic structure that existed before the IRA. It very much continues after the IRA, but there are two new funding aspects here, and the first is what I'd refer to as the direct payment of the credit. The rather than having a tax equity partnership, certain governmental entities, tribal nations, non-for-profits, co-ops will be entitled to get the credit for the duration of the production facility. By the way, the slide's got a typo in here. It says 12 years, but that's the way it is for carbon capture, but 10 years. I'll make available the slides after this. If you kind of just think about it, you're able to get if you're one of these types of facilities, a co-op or a governmental entity, entities that largely don't pay tax, you would otherwise have had a tax equity partnership, but that's complicated, and not every project is suitable for a tax equity partnership arrangement. But the code now provides for direct payment of the tax credit, and that the amount of the credit varies depending on, or the amount that's available for direct pay varies between the nature of the taxpayer. I'll say that not every credit is available for direct pay. Hydrogen and carbon capture, the two areas I spend the most time in, are available or have access to direct pay. For the co-ops, governmental entities, tribal nations, the credit is going to be available for all 10 years. For others, regular corporations that invest in hydrogen or carbon capture, the credit is going to be available for 5 years. That's just a kind of a very novel aspect. It certainly brings in the transaction cost for these type of entities, and a lot of attention has been spent by both the IRS, Treasury, and taxpayers on exactly what this section 6417 means in practice. Now, then there's another aspect here that is really important. So we can have direct pay for really the tax exempts, the co-ops, for all 12 years or 10 years, and for 5 years for other taxpayers. But another provision of the code, contrary to anything I've ever seen, except perhaps in the early 1980s, allows for the credit to be transferred. So you can sell the credit to a third party. After 5 years, if you're, if you decide to get direct pay, years 6 through 10, you can sell the credit to a third party. Or if you simply don't want to invest in the tax equity partnership, you can sell the credit. And that is a very novel aspect of the legislation. It's again one of these provisions sketched out in the statute. There's no legislative history, by the way, at all for any of the provisions on the IRA. So both practitioners like myself, the IRS, Treasury, and the Bar Association have been busy at work trying to identify or develop the details of what this provision is. It's novel. There are, throughout the code, various restrictions on the transferability of tax benefits like net operating losses. You've probably heard of them in the years. This flies in the face of all that, but that was part of the compromise. And so why did they do that? Well, because not everybody was the type of taxpayer that could invest in the tax equity partnership. And there probably wasn't going to be enough tax capacity in among the investors that would invest in a tax equity partnership to really cover all the possible sources of credit in the renewable energy area. A couple of things that are just a little bit unusual about it. One is that the credit can only be transferred for cash. No other property can be used. It doesn't even look like the credit can be transferred for cash plus a note. That remains to be seen. There are people that are arguing the contrary, but I think we have to go with that for the time being. The credit can be transferred only once. Now, that again is something we're going to really learn about when, what exactly that means. If you use a tax equity partnership, does that mean that you can't change ownership within the partnership? That's a topic that people have been really studying over the last several months. What is the discount rate? So we know the credit might be worth $1, but what is the market going to pay for those credits? It's going to be 95 cents on the dollar, 80 cents, 70, who knows? And you can imagine that there'll be some competition for credits, but the discount rate itself is going to vary depending on the riskiness of the project itself, how close it is to having this really solid program, all the different aspects that are going to be required under the regulations under Section 45E, how certain is going to, the emission measurements are being calculated, things like that, all these things that would, the issues about the labor and the wage requirements. There's a risk allocation that goes on in the tax equity partnership transactions, and it's going to be transferred over to the transferability of the credit transactions. And then finally, there's right now a prohibition on individuals benefiting from the tax credits that might result from a tax equity partnership. Again, I mentioned that the people that invest in those are the big banks, maybe the regional banks, and I'll add the big corporates like the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks. But there's at least an argument that under the statute that individuals can acquire the credit, and that I think that's you can certainly make an argument whether people are debating whether that was intentional or not, and whether that really is something that the IRA should come to grips with when they or really sanction when they issue regulations. So that covers my 45 minutes on this deck. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to hand the podium back to Danielle and open up the floor to discussions.
Wow, Peter, thank you so much. My brain's exploding with ideas, and I was going to keep letting you go. You could have went longer. We've got a few questions in the chat, and I will read them to you. I'm just going to go in the order that they were received. Let's see. So I think the first one I saw was Michael Kramer, and Michael asks, how does the IRA handle credits for hydrogen produced from nuclear?
Well, that's a great point, because if nuclear is a clean source of energy, right? There's no hydrocarbons involved. And so if, if the energy is sourced from nuclear energy, just like wind or solar, you're going to get the maximum $3 a kilogram or 30% investment tax credit. Great point.
Interesting. And this question this next one is Rick Bart's. It may be asked a couple times, and this is a question I've had for the longest. It's, do investment credits include products using hydrogen or just facilities producing hydrogen?
It's only that this is is based on the facility. So it's that $100 million or 50 million, whatever the number is, that you use to produce the facility.
Gotcha. So I'll just add in, at what point are there credits to folks using hydrogen?
Well, that would be the production credit. So if you're producing hydrogen, you can either sell it or you can use it. And one of the parties to the transaction will be able to get the credit. There's going to be negotiation between the parties in terms of whether the producer gets the credit or the person using the hydrogen gets the credit.
I see.
We haven't seen that yet, but it's certainly something that is come up on the business models that have been examining.
Yeah, because like, how do you incentivize airlines to use hydrogen? Would they be able to share that credit with the producers?
Yeah, I mean, that would just be a matter of agreement between the parties.
Gotcha. Glenn Dawson asks, is sustainable aviation fuel credit available to aerospace companies if they use hydrogen as a fuel? I think this is kind of the same question, as a fuel, or is it just for the hydrogen producers? So I think he kind of answered that.
Sustainable aviation, that was in a different bucket, and I just want to
Ah.
clarify that. Sustainable aviation just does not apply to hydrogen. It
Right.
used to apply to liquefied hydrogen, but it's no longer there, and it's just been carved out.
Yeah, that slide was so valuable for me because it's so confusing when you're telling somebody that's new to this space about they put hydrogen in a sustainable aviation fuel, and I'm like, no, so hydrogen's not a sustainable aviation fuel. It is technically, but not on paper. So
Yeah,
that
exactly.
really helped me conceptualize like why it wasn't. All right. Rishav asked, what are pre-flip? I didn't know what this meant either. What are pre-flip, post-flip, and pay-go?
Okay, so with the tax equity partnership, there's generally going to speaking going to be a period before the allocation of credits and cash flow is changed. Now, it starts out with the investors, I'll call them the banks, getting 99% of the credits. And once a period of time passes, or a targeted rate of return is reached, then there's the flip transaction, and then the allocation might switch from 99.1 to 199.
Okay.
So see, and then the same thing with cash flows. It starts out as 99.5. It flips once that target return is met. Then it goes to 5 and 95. And pay-go is basically just this concept of, well, we'll put money in as the projects develop. So there's a contingent, there's a minimum investment, and generally speaking, it's going to be 20%, and then there's an amount that can be contingent, depending on the outcome of the transaction.
Thank you. Got it. Monterey Gardner asks or says, can you comment on the current discussions regarding simultaneous electricity production and then hydrogen production versus some net metering, free grid storage, and concerns around distribution? Sorry, there's a little thing covering up this, around distribution lines losses. A second major negotiation point is if the renewable energy project is new or already existing when counting the primary energy carbon content. Any comments would be welcome. It was long. Do you want me to reread it?
It's long. I actually found the question.
Okay.
It's a complicated question, and I'd rather respond to that offline. How about that?
Got it. I'll make sure and connect Monterey
No,
and Peter
absolutely
offline.
delighted to speak to, it's very specific and complicated. We can talk about that offline.
Got it. How does an SPV figure in pre-flip, post-flip?
Well, the SPV is the
Sorry,
vehicle,
SPV. Yeah.
SPV, right? It's that triangle at the bottom of the slide. That's the tax equity partnership, and that is an SPV, a special purpose vehicle. It means it can be any type of vehicle, but traditionally going to be LLCs. But that's where all the activity related to the production of the hydrogen or wind or solar or carbon capture takes place.
Got it. That I believe I think there might be one more question in here. I got to scroll up to find it. Someone asked it to me personally, and I didn't know the answer. So I'm going to ask you. Just find it. What is an enhanced credit?
Okay. Again, it's a major theme that is throughout the IRA. So the basic idea is that the credit is a lower dollar amount. But if the producer or user complies with the labor and wage and apprenticeship requirements, then the credit is multiplied by 5, and that's the enhanced credit.
Gotcha. Thank you. We do have a few minutes left. If anybody wants to unmute and turn their camera on, they can ask Peter a question directly, but I do ask you keep your questions and comments relevant to this discussion. Keep it professional, and I'll give you a second to do that. If you want, you can go ahead and unmute. And while we're waiting for somebody to do that, I want to let you all know about the High Sky Pod, which is, if this discussion was a little in the weeds for you, a little too technical, we at High Sky, we meet daily. We have our daily stand-ups, and we have these incredible conversations where we're just sharing news, and they basically inspire these crazy conversations. And we just thought, we should be recording these. And so we started a podcast. We release episodes every 2 weeks, and I'll go ahead and link you to our first episode. And I want to just let you know that we are a nonprofit. We're 100% donor funded. And so if you like what we're doing, please, feel free to make a donation on our website. It's super easy. Just go to highsky.org. You can make a donation. You can also purchase past webinars and all of that good stuff. So for us to keep bringing you this amazing content, please make a donation. Ovi asks, do you have any info on the grants available and process of applying for them? Good question.
Well, you have to look at the, I think it's the Nettle website. I can send somebody a link, afterward, but they're evolving all the time, in terms of, what's out there. In fact, I just, over the weekend, saw that there was a grant program available for the production of electrolysis. So if somebody wants to send me an email, or I'll send it in, I'll tell you where to look. But it's a competitive process. The funding is not unlimited. So, it requires somebody to have a very good business plan, and the plan's got to be viable. And, just as a general comment, that they're not, if your budget, let's just say, is $10 million, don't expect to get a credit, to get a loan or a grant for $10 million. There's a cost sharing element. And you're probably going to get a loan or a grant of about $5 million. That's just the nature of the beast. But the other major point is, look at the Nettle website for the grants, and just, be very rigorous and sending in your application on a timely basis.
Yeah, I'll definitely connect you offline. And it's actually a great time for me to mention. So, we're a new organization. We were founded last year and we just launched in January. We're building on our website, which is free to register. We're building an location for everybody to chat and share information. And let me just share my screen really quick and show you what you can do. It's not beautiful, but if I can find it, Rishav, what's our link to? Oh, okay. So you're going to go to create. If you don't already have an account, get an account. But then once you have an account, and this is totally free, you can go down and go to Hi Chat, and that's our own Discord server. And we just launched this, so there's not a lot, but this is like just for this community that you can share information. I think only 3 of us have used it. We just built this, but we're also in the process of building a more robust system where we can add and share. But for now, this is something that you can all join for free, shared link. So I highly encourage you to get in here and do this. Doesn't cost you a thing. And yeah, so that's something where we can all find each other. So something that you can do right now.
Yeah.
And so yeah, if you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to comment. I pulled up the grant announcement.
Cool.
And I'll send you, Danielle, the links just so you can pass it around. I don't want to.
And you could even stick it in the chat if you want.
If I can. It may be dangerous though to do that, but we'll see. But
Okay, you can send it to me and I can put it
let's see what happens over the course of the next minute or two. But it's, I'm looking at it, energy.gov, where Biden administration announced a $75 million advanced clean energy grant for hydrogen technologies. And let me just see, I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to see if I can send that to you, okay?
Okay, good. And if anybody else has any other questions, now is your chance to ask. I'm gonna wait for that.
I do have one other thing. I'd like to get back on the video for a sec.
Go for it. Did you email me that?
I didn't email it to you yet,
Okay.
but I will in 1 second and see if I can. Probably can't see my sheet. Share screen.
Yeah, we don't see your screen. Well, now we do.
Okay, so this is kind of a fun ending. You guys remember Guardian of the Galaxy? The movie, the Marvel movie, and that's Groot. And Groot was out there to save the galaxy. So he's saying goodbye to everybody. But let me see if I can find that website.
Thank you for sharing your contact info. I know many people greatly appreciate that. That saves me. Yeah, Michael Kramer asked, could you post it in the chat of the Zoom? So if you go to the bottom of your screen, there should be a little chat button. You can just paste the link in there and then everybody can just click it.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to share your screen. And don't you love when you're on the spot on camera? It's the best.
I love it.
Whatever's easiest
Okay,
for you.
I think I'm going to have it here. Just hang on a sec.
Okay.
Chat. And go to everyone. How about this? Everyone in the meeting will get this. Here we go. Video like that.
Boom, we got it.
Yes.
And so nobody's turning on their cameras today. That's fine. If there's anything else that you wanted to say that you didn't cover, I have learned when an attorney is giving me their time, I want to let you talk as much as possible. So if there's anything else you'd like to add that maybe you didn't get to, we've got 12 minutes left.
So I see a question here from Glenn, right? Looking for I think state grants or Philip, right? Oh, there are state grants.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Peter. Let me just read the question out loud so in case people don't see the chat. Are there any current DEO, DOT, I'm thinking maybe he meant DOE, DOT and DOD grants or tax credits we should be looking at right now? Suggestions are always appreciated.
Well, I think the grant for DOE is is the one I just sent. I have not seen, I've not followed. Let me go back. There's those website, and it's called grants.gov. And you just want to go ahead and sign up for that. And I get an email every day basically saying what grants are available, and they're all across the board. They're that covers DOT, DOE, State Department. So it's just there's funding available. It's not necessarily going to be related to hydrogen, but I think it's a fair comment to say that there may be a grant in DOT or DOD that is relates to clean energy, not just DOE. So I think that's a fair comment. And then there was one before that, Philip Hodge. You see that?
Yeah, Philip asks, are there state grants as well? Excellent question.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely state grants, and it just depends on the jurisdiction, but they're a big part of the process. I just noticed that late last week, the state of Illinois had announced credits. Well, let me just say credits first. There are going to be state credits very similar to what you see on the federal side, but they vary all across the board. And so it's going to be really hard to categorize that. State grants, I can say that in my state of New York, I live in New Jersey. I live in Princeton, New Jersey. So I'm always following, what they're doing in terms of cleaning, and New Jersey and New York are very progressive in that area, and so, if you just search the New Jersey or New York State websites, you'll see grants for clean energy, and there's a lot of money being devoted to this. And likewise, you're going to see the same thing in general on the West Coast. And I'm going to say, generally speaking, the left-leaning states are very progressive in this area, but that's just something that I see. But I know that other states in the Midwest are doing the same thing.
So you mentioned you get notifications every day from grants.gov. They're not necessarily related to hydrogen. Are there any specific filters? Something that I struggle with is knowing what to search for on grants.gov, because it can be slightly overwhelming. I'd love to know what you search.
Well, my filter, is pretty broad, but when I do the searches, again, this is my practice, it's carbon capture and it's going to be hydrogen. There are other people there that, appropriately would be searching wind or solar or storage. But I just kept the field open. Just every morning I get up and I say, oh, well, this is interesting. And because as you mentioned, I'm in a big law firm. I focus on carbon and hydrogen, other people that are good friends of mine might focus on solar or wind or storage. And if I see something, I just pass along to one of my colleagues.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for that. You've got the last 7 minutes. If anybody has a question, now's your chance. I highly recommend taking advantage of this expensive man. We got 7 more minutes. And if nobody asks or unmutes, we'll end early. But I'm hoping another question will come in. Some people
I
wait
can
a
just say
while.
that I
Yeah.
am super excited about this area, and every time I do a search for H2 and aviation, you see all these different incredible announcements. The one that really caught my eye is one that you sent around the other day. Was that universal hydrogen? Right? I think, is that what it was?
Yeah. Record flight.
Yeah, exactly. That was just really nice. And what I thought was interesting is they had a really good display of what, the infrastructure, what the tanks would look like that would carry the hydrogen, and what the fuel cells, what the configuration would be like, in the aircraft. As I say, this area is progressing at light speed. Where, better than I, but I think we're going to really see some real progress after 2030. And I hope to be part of this whole transition.
Yeah, and I just want to take a second to brag that this group knew that universal hydrogen, and then in a partnership with Plug Power, we knew that was happening in I believe it was early 2022, maybe even 21. They presented to this group, showed us their partnership, showed us the tanks, showed us the infrastructure, and I was just mind blown that forklift company, Plug Power, was involved in aviation and wanted to know more. So we had Plug Power speak twice. We had universal hydrogen. And so I was not surprised to see that, but that just kind of tells you how ahead of the game we've sort of been in this group. And it's just really exciting. Another question comes in from Naresh. Are the certification norms mature enough to take on hydrogen?
And the answer is well, it depends what we mean by certification. Because the certifications are going to be in the LCA analysis. And also there is a requirement that a third party verify the source and production and use of the hydrogen. I think that, okay. Okay. Well, FAA. Oh, I don't know if this is a tax question.
I was just about to say, Naresh, Peter's a tax attorney. So ASTM, FAA Part 23 is probably out of the scope of his expertise. That's probably more of we're working on getting FAA to speak. And I should also mention that High Sky Monthly has been so successful that we're completely booked for this year. And that was another reason why we started the podcast. And so we're looking into bringing on people so we can have more casual discussions. And I would love to get somebody from the FAA, hint, on our podcast to talk about things like this. Glenn Dawson asks, are the hydrogen tax credit you received able to be applied for at the same time as corporate carbon offsets?
Yeah, thank you for raising that question, Glenn. That's a really good comment. Yeah, I mean, the hydrogen tax credits are simply tax credits. And at the same time, the company that is reducing CO2 might be eligible to get a carbon offset. And the dollar amounts that I've seen for carbon offset credits are just enormous. Somebody showed me some pricing that was in the neighborhood of $500 a ton. I don't know if I haven't verified that, but that market is really progressing. And so I would, on all the transactions, we look at the tax credits, but we also look at the carbon offsets. So yeah, I think that's just a really important point. I'd also just, you mentioned, Danielle, about plug power. And at the end of, 21, I worked on a couple of presentations for the United States Energy Association on moving toward hydrogen. And you can just search the USEA website for hydrogen, and you'll see really, we had 2 days of webinars on just the potential for hydrogen in just as an alternative source of energy. And one of our speakers was the CEO from Plug Power, and
Andy Marsh.
yes, and that fellow is just so so convincing. I have to just tell you, he approaches the whole area with so much enthusiasm, and it's folks like him that I think were really behind the development of the tax credit.
I agree, and just out of the box ideas. I mean, I never thought in my lifetime I would see a forklift industry get involved in aviation and just completely verticalize their business model. And it's been somebody that I've been following for a couple of years and learning from. And speaking of being ahead of the game, like I said, we knew about Universal and Plug almost 2 years ago. Now, I want everybody to listen to this closely. Next month at High Sky Monthly, we have Johannes from Next Arrow, and I'm just going to share my screen really quick because you probably haven't heard of him yet, but he's a flight test engineer at H2 Fly. H2 Fly, who we also knew about prior to Joby acquiring them, has now started this company, Next Arrow. This is definitely one you want to watch. Go RSVP. That's April 17th. And it's going to be another one that we're going to get to brag about and say, hey, we were talking about that in 2023 in March. So definitely go register for that. It's a company you want to be watching. And I think with that, it is noon my time. So thank you so much, Peter. I have learned a ton. This is definitely a webinar I'm going to go back and watch multiple times. So many critical points you talked about. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at Flying High.
Yeah, and again, I'll send you the deck, and then you can recirculate it to the membership.
Cool.
It's been a lot of fun working with you, Danielle, over the last month or so, and really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the group.
It was the first of many. I look forward to our future engagements. Thank you so much, Peter, and thanks to all of our attendees. Everybody have a fantastic week.
All right, thank you.